All right, so I'm going to be attempting to kind of explain how to do this and what it is that we learned from that last chapter, chapter 5. I'm just going to kind of summarize some things in here, toss it in. So if we can see here, we have to write a code right here. So these first few blocks here it's asking us to write code to validate the input if a user doesn't enter a number. So if it's not a number, so for instance, if they enter letters, that is one of them, not a number. And so then we have to tell the user their input is invalid. And we also have to write code to display an error if any of the length or the input here are negative or 0. So let's just go ahead and kind of write that down here real quick. We need to have something, right? We need that input cannot be a string. This is just kind of like generalizing it. This is not exactly how we're going to write it out, but this is just to kind of summarize it and to tell us what it is that we're technically going to need here. So see, that's the first part. Then we need to have another thing that says the length cannot be negative or 0. So we're going to type length. Let's see, cannot be negative or 0. So length has to be greater than 0. Because if we put equal to, then it allows length to be 0. But we don't want it to be 0. So let's see here. We can get rid of these blocks here. There we go. Okay. We can get rid of these two blocks here because they're identical to the one up here. And actually, I'm going to move this up so that way I have a little bit more kind of room to breathe in. And I'm just going to space these things out. Okay. Let's see, what else do we need for this program? We need to write an if and else statement that compares the lengths and tells the user whether or not they can form a triangle. Okay. We need an if statement that compares the lengths. Okay. We'll do that when we get there, but this is good to know. Remember that if any of the length is greater than the sum of the other two, it cannot form a triangle. So if basically if A plus B is greater than C, that's a triangle. If A plus B equals C, then this here is, and just so I can kind of make this not so messy, I'm going to do this here. So let's space this out. This here, so if A plus B is equal to C, right? So two of the lengths added together equals the exact same as C, then this would be considered a degenerate triangle. And if A plus B is less than C, then this is just not a triangle at all. just align this all. Okay. So it doesn't say that we need to have this one here, but I'm going to be adding it in. And it just asks for if it's not a triangle or if it's a triangle. So we only really need these two here. I'm going to move this one down. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to space these out. Okay. So let's see if we can get rid of this. Kind of summarized it right here. So print statement below is just here, something output. Okay, cool. So we can get rid of that. All right. So let's see here. We want to make sure that the input is valid data. So if we actually go to the web page here for the O'Reilly book, here it is. So if we look at it here, it says validating input. So if we scroll down and we input text where it should be a double, we're going to get an exception and the whole program's kind of going to blow up. So if we scroll down a little further, it says, it gives you the kind of code you need to fix this problem. So that way, instead of blowing up, it just gives you an error and you can actually continue in your program. So let's look at how we can implement this into our code. Let's first look what in is. So in for them is their scanner. So we're going to go ahead and supplement ours for theirs. So instead of in, we have get input on our side. We'll show you that in a moment. And then let's see, what else does it say? It says in has next double. Okay. So this is basically saying if the next input is not a double because of this exclamation mark, then it will say string will create a variable called word, a variable being a string variable, and it will store in, right? You'll use the scanner, and it will create the scanner for that very specific input that you put that is not a double, and then it will say the error, system error print, and then I'll show the word, which is the string here, and then it'll say is not a number. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this. Oops. Having a little bit of trouble here. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to go ahead and go back into our code, and we are going to paste it right here, right under the get input. And instead of in, we're actually going to substitute it here. And actually, I want to change this name. So I'm going to go ahead and right click this, find all references, or no, change all occurrences, I believe it is. Yeah, so it adds a cursor to each one. I'm going to change this to scan 4. This is just it's easier for reading. Okay, now I'm just going to double click this, copy this, replace in with that, replace in with that. Okay, now if we run the program, it should run. We don't have anything that tells us to input a number, so it just looks like it's blank. So we're just going to put test. Nope, it still blew up. figure out. So it looks like I overlooked something here. It's actually supposed to be before the input. So if we hover our mouse over this, scan for dot has next double basically means it returns true if the next token in the scanner input can be interpreted as a double value using next double method. This scanner does not advance past any input. So if it's not a double, or it can't be converted into a double, that's what causes our program to blow up. But if we add this in here, and it looks for the next input, and if it's not a double, then it runs this code. Else, it'll do this stuff here. So let's see if that actually fixes it. If we do test, it works. Perfect. This is great. I'm just gonna add a little space here. So we can do this for all of them. Test. Nope. Okay. So we will have to add in one right before each one. So now let's try that again. Test, test. Oh, try it again. So test. Let's input number. Test. Number. Test. Number. Okay. Perfect. So that works. Okay. So we got the first part here, right? So we wanted to say write code to validate the input, which we did here. If the user does not enter a number, tell the user their input is invalid. Okay, we're just gonna copy that. Just gonna kind of paste it in. No worries there. And we can just go ahead. I believe it's change all occurrences. Yep. We're just gonna delete those. What if we used a while? So what we can do is we can do test, test, test. Okay, that works, right? If is a one-time thing, while it's not the correct thing. So well, let's test this real quick. That worked. Test. So it did go to the next line because in this one here, and actually, do we need this if statement? We can go ahead and try that out. We'll see if that even is relevant. So I'm just going to comment it out. Save it. Gonna go ahead and run. And let's do test again. Test. Okay. So it doesn't, this if statement is completely redundant and we don't need it at all. So this works fine without it. So we're just gonna run it like that. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to test for first length. And one thing that's kind of bugging me here is the fact that this is not initialized at the top. You'll see the issue that I'm going to have here in a moment. Let me just go ahead and copy these over. This gonna say second and third, and then I want all of these to equal 0 at the start. You'll see why in just a moment. Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and change these to here. Oops, a daisy. I'm going to change it to while. Okay. Now that we have these changed, we can not worry about those anymore. Let me give myself some space. Whoops, a daisy. Some space here. And we need an if statement. The if statement is going to be for this section here. We want the length to be greater than 0. So what we're going to do is going to be if first length, look at that, it's greater than 0. Then we want to save the next double. Or actually, hold on, nope. I want to do if it's less than, because we want to show the error, right? So, and actually I'm going to use a while loop here as well, because if we don't use a while loop, it'll just test it once, and then it'll skip over and give us, it'll store that very same value. And we'll get an error at the very end, which is not what we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and, while first length is less than 0, we're going to go ahead and ask the user to input this here again to give us an input that is accurate. So a length that is not negative or 0. So we need to also put out a system here, and we want it to say lengths. So I'm just going to copy this here. We're going to say lengths can not be negative or 0. And then we can, if you want, you can put in here, we're going to concatenate the number that they input. So first length, period, you input, or your input was, now we can go ahead and do that. This way, if we run the program, what ends up happening is if I put a -4, the lengths cannot be negative or 0. Your input was -4. So then if we put 4, it just goes to the next thing. Okay? It goes on to the next statement, I should say, not thing. All right. So this here is all for 1. Yep, that is correct. Okay. Just making sure here. So as you can see, we first test to see if what we are inputting is actually convertible into a double. If not, then we store that variable into a string called word. And we don't need this anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna delete this here. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. So I'm just going to delete this here. Okay. So it'll store it into Word if it's a string, and then it'll give us the error input is invalid. If we input the correct variable that can be converted into a double, it will then store it into this first length. Then, if first length is less than 0, then actually there should be 1 here. No, correction. Less than or equal to. That way, if we put in 0, it'll also give us an error. Alrighty, so here if first length is actually greater than 0, then it'll continue on to the next statement, which is this one, this while loop. And if it's convertible into a double, it'll store it again into second length, and so on and so forth. So we will just kind of copy this over. We're gonna go ahead and put it here under second length. What we're gonna do is we're gonna change these first lengths, delete them, then type second length. And we're just going to do the same thing for the third one here. Replace these with third length. And now we have kind of our test for the input and restrictions kind of set. So we don't have to really worry about this anymore. Now we have to write an if and else statement that compares the length and tells the user whether or not they can form a triangle with these numbers that they input. So I want to actually create this here. So I'm going to go ahead and enter. I'll go ahead and enter here again. Okay, so I want this, right? And I want to keep it this way. A plus B on the left side and C on the right side. So one way we can do that is we have to store our input into these variables, but we also have to grab the largest number and store it into C, or else it can give us the response that it is a triangle when it isn't. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. We're going to go at the top. We're going to go ahead and, since our integers are doubles, we want to make sure that these values A are doubles as well, and we also want to initialize them with 0. So I'm just going to copy these here. This is going to be B, and this is going to be C. Okay. So now we have to add if statements. So we want to say if parentheses, we're going to say second length is less than first length, and first length is greater than third length. Then we want to store that into C. C equals first length. This is the largest number. Then we're going to do else if we're going to do second number. So first length is less than second length, and second length is greater than third length. Then store that into C. I want to say second length. And then the final one we can just type as else, because the only other option here, right, if the first integer that we put in here isn't bigger than the second and the third, and if the second integer is bigger than the first and the third, then the only last option we have is that the third is the bigger one out of both of these. So what we can do is just C equals third length. Oh, there we go. So now we have our C, and because of this, we can also get our other variables here. We're going to type A equals B equals. So here we're going to put second length, third length. Since we have second down here at the bottom, first length, maybe third length, right? And then this one first, second. And these two don't really matter. Like you can put second up here and first down here, or you can put third up here, first down here, or second down here and third up here. But what does matter is that the largest number has to be C. Okay, now that we have that, we can actually just now do our test. So we're going to do these tests here. So we have if A plus B is greater than C. This is going to be the easy part. This out. Then we're just going to go ahead and say it is a triangle. Oh, nice. Triangle. So what we can do here is the three numbers you input is a triangle. Then what we can do is else if A plus B is less than C, then what we put here is the three numbers. Oh, I didn't put numbers. Numbers you input is not a triangle. And then what we can do here is another else, and this one will be the only option here, which is if A plus B equals C. This will then print counting I'm going to do the three numbers you input is a degenerate triangle. I swear I'm not making that up. That's exactly what that's called. So if you want to see what I mean, let me go ahead and pull up the web browser here. Just so I could show you what it is I'm talking about. A degenerate triangle is the triangle formed by three collinear points. It doesn't look like a triangle, it looks like a line segment. So basically, it just looks like a line because both A and plus B equals C. So it's basically two of the lengths added together equals the exact same as the third length, which does not make really a triangle, it makes a line, as stated here. So here we go. This should now theoretically work. Obviously I need to close this off here, or else I'm going to get an error. So now we should be able to just go ahead and run this. So let's input 4, 6, and 10. This is a degenerate triangle. And just as we expected, three numbers you inputted is a degenerate triangle. Okay. Now let's see if we do what was the test there, or just our homework there. So instead of 1, or instead of 4, 6, 10, we're entering 1, 1, 12, which does not make a triangle. There it is. And let's try something that does make a triangle. So we can do all three sides evenly. That makes a triangle. So let's go with 3, 3, wait. Three numbers you input is a triangle. Perfect. So we got all three of them. And that is pretty much it for it. So we just kind of get a recap here. We stated our variables, created a scanner, then we tested if the scanner input can be converted into a double. If not, then it is stored instead in a string, throws a little angry warning sign at us saying that the input is invalid. Then if we do end up putting something that can be converted into a double, it skips this while loop, inputs it into the first length, then it tests if first length is that double that you input. If it's less than or equal to 0, if it is, then it gives us another error, and it says lengths cannot be negative or 0. Your input was whatever you input. Then it asks you again to input a double. If you do, then it does the same thing again. It makes sure that the next input that you put in can be converted to double, so on and so forth. Then it goes on to the final few statements here, where it sorts through all of the numbers and properly assigns them. So here it grabs the first length and tests it against second and third, making sure that first is the largest number. If it isn't, then it goes to the next one, checks if the second number is the largest number out of the three. If it isn't, then it knows that there could only be one last option, and that's the third blank. The third option, or the third number, is the largest number, and it'll just store the other as A and B. Then down here, we do a super simple test of what we kind of had written out here. And it just says A plus B is larger than C. This is a triangle. If A plus B is less than C, this is not a triangle. And then if A plus B equals C, then three numbers you input just created a degenerate triangle, or really a straight line. And that's pretty much all there is for this